get started now that we know the recording's going. So today joining us, we have some folks from Vermont State Housing Authority and from the state of Vermont, both all coming on to give us sort of an update about some of the new programs that are getting launched, particularly the Landlord Relief Program, which is a brand new program. And, to give us some quick updates about some of the other programs that have wound down or are in the process of winding down. And so joining us today, we have Tyler Moss from Vermont State Housing Authority. Many of you probably have dealt with him through the RHSP program in 2020, and then to some extent the VRAP program in 2021 and 2022. Along with him is Caprice Hoover, who's also from Vermont State Housing Authority. She worked as the program manager for VRAP and is now going to be managing the Landlord Relief Program. And I believe we also have Lily Sojourner on from the state of Vermont, who is overseeing these programs as well. So I think we turn it over to Lily to start, Tyler.
Sure, Lily. Just a quick overview of how this started.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for having us today. My name is Lily Sojourner. I'm with the Vermont Office of Economic Opportunity, which is part of the Department for Children and Families within Vermont's Agency of Human Services. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the Vermont Landlord Relief Program that Angela mentioned. At the end of last legislative session, $5 million was allocated for this program. The goal of the program is to provide resources to landlords to mitigate what might be real or perceived risks when housing Vermonters who are low income or experiencing homelessness. The goal is really to increase rental units available to this population while making sure landlords feel like they have a safety net. This is one of the multiple approaches that the state is taking as we move forward from sort of our pandemic era programs, some of which are winding down, which Tyler and Caprice could talk about later. And so this is one of many things that we're moving forward. We're excited to be working with Vermont State Housing Authority to administer the program. It is at this point one-time funding, as I said, $5 million. We're not quite sure how long that's going to last, and so we will be working closely with Vermont State Housing Authority. They will be providing us with monthly utilization reports so we can really see how the funding is progressing. Is it doing what we want it to do, which is both support landlords as well as open up the availability of units for some of Vermont's most vulnerable renters. Tyler and Caprice will go into more details of the program. We are hoping to launch by the end of January. And so today is just sort of a great preview for us. If you think about you're at the movies, this is like your sneak peek of this program. And hopefully Brian and Angela will have us come back, maybe in February or March, and we can have more details to share. We'll have some things up and running. But we're excited to be here to give a preview, and I will turn it over to Tyler.
Good. Hello, everybody. I am Tyler Moss with the Vermont State Housing Authority. Thank you for having us here today to discuss the Landlord Relief Program. I think I would like to just share my screen I am not allowed to share my screen at the moment. Hopefully Brandon can make that happen. In the meantime, I'll do some magic tricks.
So I think just to reiterate, while we're working through some of our technical difficulties today, this program is slated to launch at the end of January. And so there'll be probably more details coming out. Tyler, are you going to be sending emails out to the VRAP email list? So landlords are already on that. They'll get some notifications.
Absolutely. So One of the things that we've done with this program is we're going to use the same platform, the same type of portal as the VRAP program. And one of the main reasons that we decided to go that route was that we have over 4,000 landlords already in that system. They already have their payment information in there. They already have their profile set up. They're getting payments through this. So they will only need to log on with their normal credentials and select the Landlord Relief Program as opposed to VRAP, and they'll be ready to start with any claims that they may have. So that's a huge advantage. We will also be utilizing our newsletter, which has the same number or close to that of landlords, many landlords on that. So we will be getting out messaging through the newsletter or similar form. It'll be a Landlord Relief Program newsletter, not a VRAP newsletter, but we still have all that contact information. So we do have that, and we will be setting up trainings and webinars and such periodically as needed.
Okay, cool.
More quickly in the beginning and then on from there.
Nice. So it looks like the screen share should be enabled for you. And I think, quickly, if a landlord's not already on your mailing list or your email mailing list, what's the best way for them to get on that so they would get those notifications?
We could probably.
I'm going to put my email in the chat if that works. And you can email me and I will add you to the list.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right, and then also the way we did it with VRAP, we'll do this again where we will have on our webpage, the Landlord Relief Program webpage, and that'll be accessed through the Vermont State Housing Authority webpage as well. And we will, you'll be able to sign up for the newsletter through the website as well. So I don't know if I'm full screen here or not, but all right. So we're here to discuss the Landlord Relief Program, partnership with the state of Vermont and the Vermont State Housing Authority. Lily has talked a little bit about the overview, but this works a lot like a risk pool. I think maybe some of you are familiar with the way risk pools have worked in the past to support landlords and stabilize rental housing for Vermonters. This is going to focus on, it's changing without me for some reason. This is going to be one of those technical days, isn't it?
We all have them.
Yeah, it went right into the slideshow. So excuse me while I try to fix that. Why did it go to a slideshow or not?
That's all right. I started this issue with my internet going down and having to join via my cell phone. So we're all having a day today.
Yeah.
First world problems.
Yeah, they should.
I'm an optimist with one annoyance. If I wake up, it's a pretty good day.
There we go. I can see that.
Yeah, you can see that. It might. I'm just hoping it doesn't change unless I try to take it off of slideshow, but I might just have to do it like this. Whoa. It says it disabled my.
Would you like me to? I have it as well if you want me to try to help support you.
That might be saying that it won't.
There we go.
We can just do it like this. It might be a full screen, but either way, that should be fine. The program is basically to help landlords and tenants, to build up that strong relationship for successful tenancies, and to have landlords be willing to work with tenants who are receiving rental assistance. It's also to make sure that landlords have good, strong leases in place that we all know are great tools to ensure good tenancies, both for the landlord and the tenant. And by having this in place, we hope to also increase the inventory of rental units that are available to Vermonters. And they'll be able to provide different resources to keep those Those tendencies strong. The program does allow for up to $5,000 in eligible expenses, and those can be the cost to hold a unit for future program eligible tenants. Specifically, that would be somebody like who received a voucher, a Section 8 voucher. The Vermont State Housing Authority has 500 vouchers that we are going to be getting out into the streets this coming up soon. Of course, we've received 3,000 applications so far for those 500 vouchers. So we're working through that, but we would be able to hold a unit for someone who had a voucher. Say they found a unit, they were approved for it, and then they had their inspection, the housing quality standards inspection, found some deficiencies, but still wanted to hold the unit. We would be able to cover the vacancy loss during that time while the owner brought the unit up to code. We'd also be able to pay for vacancy due to repairs that were needed that exceeded normal wear and tear. And so we will be looking, that landlords use security deposits first, and then after that, we also pay for the vacancy after 1 month. The damages in the unit will be focusing mostly on tenant damages that damages that were caused by the tenant. So this wouldn't be maintenance issues like a bad roof or a red tag boiler. This would be something that happened in the unit by the tenant. So
so Tyler, not to interrupt you, which I'm going to do anyway, this is a good plug to remind landlords to be using inspection checklists and to be doing walkthroughs at the time of lease up. So there's some record of what the condition was when the tenant moved in, because I presume later on you're going to go over some things that landlords would need. And probably one of them is to be able to prove that the tenant caused the damage.
Absolutely. Inspections are a big part of the program. So yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more. There will be a low end as well. So this is up to $5,000, but we will also have a minimum claim of at least $500. So this wouldn't be tapped into to just replace a smoke detector or something like that. It would be for, and the local risk pools will still be available. And so those often do settle these $200 damages or something like that, which could help out, but this would be for larger expenses. We'll also be able to cover back or unpaid rent or utilities, and the details of that are still being finalized due to some changes that have just come to light. Joint Fiscal has extended some of the VRAP benefits through June, so we need to really discuss with the agency administration how that's going to work for landlords and this program in coordination with VRAP. And then if there's an early termination by the tenant, so if the tenant just leaves without notice, then that would also cover up to 1 month of rent for that. So the requirements of the program, Angela was just getting into, are I just did not have enough technical. Will be that they have a formal lease. Like I said, we're hoping to get some lease, to get those leases to be tightened up throughout the state, and that they're renting to a tenant who received any form of rental assistance within the last 5 years. It can be a short-term subsidy or long-term subsidy, such as the Section 8. Or it could be available to tenants that come off of the continuing of care's coordinated entry list. Would be another way for the tenant to be eligible. It will need to demonstrate that landlords have done regular inspections and will continue on the property and the unit. So that would be within the past 2 years. If they need to get an inspection, then that will have to be done either through municipal or perhaps through the public housing agency that is issuing a voucher. And again, those checklists that Angela was talking about, those move in, move out stuff, that would be always a great thing to have. We are focusing on getting this out to landlords that don't have other options available to them. And in doing so, we're asking that landlords would show that they have exhausted any other resources available to them. And that would be mostly for nonprofit landlords that have access to funds through USDA rural development or, the project-based voucher program, shelter plus care, those type of things have different safety mechanisms in place. You'd also want the unit will need to be in compliance with local and state inspections, health and safety codes, and any sort of registration requirements. If this program can be used to bring the unit up to that code. So if it doesn't meet at the time, then this would be what would bring it up to that section. There will be affordability guidelines, and those can either be determined by the subsidy or they can be determined by it's what's affordable to 120% of area median income. And so this would not be an income eligibility requirement of the tenant. So the tenant does not need to provide the pay stubs or anything like that. But they'd have to show that the rent is affordable to anyone under 120%. So it'd be about 30%. And there's so many variables there about room size, bedroom size and location that I won't go into the details of that, but we can get those guidelines. I can actually probably share those with Angela, who could send those out to the group, and they'll be in our newsletters and such coming out. But that's also available on the VHFA website, and so they'll use their guidance to remain consistent with other programs in the state. And who can apply? So any rental housing owner, landlord, or property manager can apply. Again, this will be a landlord initiated program, very different from VRAP, which was tenant initiated. The claim must be for residential tenancies in Vermont. It cannot be for commercial property or for non-residential properties. There will be, as I said, an online portal that'll be accessed through the VSHA website. We will have paper applications available, but they, to expedite your claim, going through the online portal will be the best way to do that. However, by request, you can get a paper application. We will offer regular trainings periodically throughout the program. And of course, translations and simultaneous interpretation is always available for any of the Vermont State Housing Authority programs. Again, here is the contact information. Caprice put her email in the chat, and you can reach out to her at any time. Hoping to have this up and running in January, and we will be getting more information out to the group.
Tyler, love the information. One of the things I think you mentioned was, having to exhaust other reasonable means for smaller landlords or even some established landlords. How does that apply to the individual? So I'm thinking of maybe somebody who bought their first apartment building a couple of years ago, hasn't built up the reserves. It's more well established. You're looking for bank accounts, you're looking for financials. I mean, I'm never against getting assistance from the government, but I also want to make sure it's there for those who need it, and I've benefited in the past. Don't think I need it right now.
Right. So this would be more for about security deposits.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be looking at your reserves or whether or not it's a solvent business. This is just basically what's on reserve for the specific unit, specific tenant.
Got it.
So that if that comes through a subsidy provider, the federal government or the state, then oftentimes they have a security net in place for damages, or sometimes they get double security deposit or and plus damages or something like that to help incur really mitigate the risk, as like this program is trying to do. But in the case of private landlords that don't have access to those type of funds, it would just be the security deposit that we'd need to see and that would be supported again by the lease, which would show what the security deposit was.
Excellent.
Right. So And so Tyler, this is really a program that's been developed to help sort of alleviate some of the fears that landlords have when renting to subsidized tenants, or things my organization's heard, I'm sure you've heard, to sort of provide that financial backstop. So if a landlord runs into an issue, their property gets damaged or rent doesn't get paid or the tenant leaves, it's sort of, look, we have this pool that you can access as sort of, I don't want to really use the word reward, but it's kind of almost as a reward for participating in these programs. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think more of a reward is more of an insurance.
Right.
Right. So this would, we are hoping to encourage people to rent to Vermonters that they, whether it's a real or perceived risk, that it won't be, if the tenancy won't go well, then this would give them a little assurance that if the tenancy does not go well, they'll be able to pay for damages. They won't have the vacancy loss, or it can mitigate some of that.
Right. And also to help them if they're saying, look, my unit's not in compliance or it needs these repairs, to be able to assist to make those so it will qualify for somebody who has a subsidy.
Absolutely. And also, yeah, just to encourage landlords to have all of those tools in place that are, I'm sure you tell them every time, make sure you have a good lease, make sure you're doing periodic inspections and documenting it, getting it signed and dated. So that's going to be a part of the program. So it's also going to be helping some of those newer landlords to sort of, understand the tools that are available to them through the law to, start out a tenancy on the right foot by having a solid lease and by having a move-in inspection. They really have a baseline to start off the tenancy, and this would be something that could just ensure that if anything went south, that there wouldn't be the financial impact that there might be without it.
Excellent. So one of the things that we've been asking for sort of a number of years, provide some assistance for landlords, help us out. We want to do this as a community, but we need some protection or some assistance. And so this is one of the solutions for that.
Right. We heard a lot of that, in the rental housing stabilization program. We did have a landlord initiated application that allowed for, 50% of the back rent. So that was, when that wasn't available, a landlord initiation of an application through VSHA. And again, that was Treasury guidance. We had no control over that. That was the only way to go. So the tenant had to be involved. Right, because to establish that it was an income eligible tenant. This
right.
program does not require that it be an income eligible tenant, just that the rents aren't astronomically high, and hopefully by using that mechanism of determining what the rent is, we'll also be able to access or provide to the tenants that we're looking to serve, but without having to require that income verification documents that have plagued a lot of programs and trying to get your last 30 days of pay stubs and that type of thing. That's slowed things down a lot in other programs.
Right. And so I think that's key, that this is going to be a landlord driven program through the application and through the process. So it's not going to require participation by the tenant to make it happen or to have funds be available, which I think will be beneficial and make access to the program a lot smoother and easier.
Right. Also, as a side note, what I'm sensing, I think it's great. Burlington, I think it was Burlington Housing or City of Burlington added the landlord advocate. So I think there's a really nice balancing that's happened. And I think a balance between residential rights or tenants' rights, landlords' rights makes for a healthy economy and makes for a healthy housing industry. So I love what I'm hearing, because I think it's going to help balance that, so we can hopefully all work more cooperatively with less divisions that we commonly see in these discussions. So thanks for the efforts. I think this is a solid program.
And Tyler, you mentioned that this is for sort of larger things. So, the bottom rung is going to be $500 sort of minimum that you will cover. But you mentioned that there's local risk pools that could cover some of the smaller expenses. Do you have a sense for where those risk pools are and how landlords could access them currently?
Our local expert, Lily Sojourner, who's on the call, would probably be better equipped to answer that question about the local risk pools.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So those I would say are really often program specific. So it's worth checking with the service providers in your community to see, do they have a risk pool as part of their sort of array of services, and what does that look like to engage? For instance, you know, some of the bigger emergency shelters in the state may have some risk pools. So if someone is housed from that shelter, that may be something that the provider and the landlord could come up with an agreement. Okay, you've housed Lily from our programming. Maybe we do a lease addendum, and if something goes wrong, you know, here are the things that you can reach out to. So some of them are agency specific. So again, checking with the providers in your community. Some are program specific. So for instance, out of Office of Economic Opportunity, we support the Family Supportive Housing Program, which exists in all areas of the state except for Lamoille and Addison. That program has a program specific risk pool. So again, if landlords are working with participants in that program, they have an understanding with those providers, they could access some of those funds. And you know, there's a lot more local flexibility in terms of you know, how they administer those. And as Tyler said, they don't tend to have like a minimum requirement. They are also often working with a lot. It's a significantly smaller pot on the local level, so to speak. So we're hoping those things will pair nicely. This is going to be a great experience for us to see what's working and what's not working. For instance, in the future, does Vermont move to extend and continue this program, you know, keep it funding as part of the agency's base budget? And if we do that, do we then try to move away from having local risk pools and instead incorporate some of the lessons learned just to make it easier for landlords to navigate? I think there's a lot that we want to, you know, a lot of data we want to gather, a lot of feedback that we want to gather, both from landlords and providers as well as tenants, to see like what's working, what do we need to change. So potentially in the future, you know, maybe a decision is made to invest more in this and we start to phase out some of those others. But again, some agencies, they may use, you know, their private funds to maintain an agency specific risk pool. So I'm happy to answer any questions as it relates to the Family Supportive Housing Program, and I can share some information with Angela to get out to the group if you're interested, because that is a program in which there's also the presence of services once someone is housed, and that doesn't have sort of like an expiration date on services. But then otherwise, you know, again, just check with the local provider in your agency to see what they might offer.
Go ahead, Angela, please.
I was going to say, so it sounds like it would be good for the landlord to pose the question, if they're working with service providers, what sort of risk pool or access to risk pool funds do you have? Because it's going to vary around the state. So just, you know, having that question in sort of your toolbox and know that these programs are out there could be helpful. I think a lot of landlords maybe don't understand that there are some of these fundings and programs that they could take advantage of. And so just knowing to ask the question, I think, is half the battle.
And I'd love to hear about some potential of service, because when I think of some of the topics that we covered, I'm thinking about, I love the comment there was earlier about potentially helping, I think it was on one of the slides, somebody who may previously experienced homelessness get in. And one of the questions that I have is, and hopefully, and please everybody give me hell if this comes across politically incorrect, respecting that some people from that population have mental illnesses. You know, I'd love to hear about services of how landlords could work with that community, also make sure there's the right support services monetarily or mental health wise, so that we can better expand the opportunity for proper housing to everyone?
Well, this program is a monetary program. This is not a service enriched program. So a lot of the people that do come off of the coordinated entry list, and Lily could probably speak to this more, have support services in place or have access to support services, but we cannot, there's always that thing where you can't force someone to accept services, right? And so that's we can make a lot of stuff available, and Vermont does have a lot of resources for people, whether homeless or whatever it is, to access, guidance, for housing and help with, whether it's mental health issues or, the drug issues are huge, right? I mean, as a landlord, it's a real problem in our state and everywhere. So that's not what this program is focusing on.
Yeah, there are definitely providers that are providing high level of services through sort of what we would refer to as high level of like permanent supportive housing programs, which would include family supportive housing. It would include HUD-funded permanent supportive housing programs. And those providers are often looking for landlords to partner with. And so in some ways, that's like a proactive approach. If you're like, I want to jump in, I want to help, I want to know that there's going to be a high level of services available. I want to know that this tenant is receiving maybe some sort of like financial assistance, which often permanent supportive housing tends to come with a voucher. Then I think, yeah, these providers would love to have like MOUs with landlords of, hey, here's this unit that I'll make available to you, and in return, here's what my understanding is of the program. And so if there are landlords who are interested in really engaging with some of these programs that are providing a high level of service, and again, kind of like proactively setting up relationships, let me know and I can connect you with the provider in your community. And again, this, like as Tyler says, that kind of pairs with this. Sometimes those programs do have their own risk pool or other support, sometimes they don't, but I think that's a great way for people to really get involved. And again, if they want to be a part of like a collaborative team, that can be a nice way to move forward.
Right. And I would like to just, when we talked about using other resources, and having to use those first, those are specifically, just to harp on this a little bit again, that Brian was talking about, that would be for the, security deposits or stuff that came with funding. If you had gotten help with your electric bill from a local community action or help with something with, a moving cost or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily have to use that other community resource first. This is specifically for security type.
And so Tyler, you may not be able to answer this question because it relates to utilities. And then knowing that there's been some level of extension of the utility program for a few months, I presume this risk pool could cover those municipalities that even if the account's in the tenant's name, they'll lien the landlord's property if the bill's not paid when the tenant vacates. Is that use of this program that could be utilized by the landlords?
That's a great question, Angela, and we'll have to get with the Public Service Department to make sure that we or to find out how that would work together. But that would be another angle, right? And always appreciate yours, Angela. And
there's not too many of them. It's most of the municipal electric companies.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, one thing that came to mind too is, when I put on my real estate broker hat, is possibly getting introductions to, buyers of properties to you folks. Because right now I'm thinking of somebody, a great situation, first time home buyer, they're buying a duplex, the second unit's a little bit rough. and finding out ways to potentially help them, somebody's helping them expand their home ownership opportunities. Maybe it's not home ownership for the second unit, but it's housing. So that might be a great thing, because I know there's a few realtors on today, is to get introductions to you folks so that people may be looking at multifamily properties can find out relief from everything for security deposits to possibly some repairs. Right. So it makes people less hesitant to get into the ownership of, multifamily or rental properties, primary or investments.
Absolutely. And we would, we're working carefully with the Department of Housing and Community Development, who is administering the VHIP program. And so that's, if there was a unit that has been vacant for 90 days or more and has extensive rehabilitation or repairs needed to bring that up to code, make it rentable, then that would be a better use or a better resource for the new owner or the new building buyer who has looking for this family and has a unit that's maybe wasn't rented for the past year because it needed all new whatever. It could be even appliances and things like that. But with VHIP, there are a few more restrictions as far as what the rent can be and who the tenant will be. So you had 5 years of fair market rent, I believe, and the tenant needs to come off the coordinated entry list. So that, but for details on that, you should talk to your local home ownership centers who are administering the program. That would be your Champlain Housing Trust, Down Street, NeighborWorks, Rural Edge, Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust.
Right, and the VHIP is the Vermont Housing Investment Program, and that's the program that will provide up to, I think, $30,000 or $50,000 of grants per unit for renovations to bring them into code compliance. We had a teaser of that program in 2021, and so that's a separate program from this risk pool. So we're seeing a lot of these new programs come on board, offering resources to landlords, I think, in an unprecedented level, something that we have not seen previously. And so it's pretty exciting, or it's pretty, it's like there's some neat things happening out there, and ways and resources that landlords can avail themselves of.
Right, and in that program, they do offer up to $50,000 for the creation of an accessory dwelling unit, which is would be a whole new. That's a good chunk of cash for the accessory dwelling unit, and that only, obviously there's no vacancy requirement because it doesn't exist yet, but also there would only be the requirement of fair market rent to rent at fair market rent for 5 years. They don't have the tenancy selection criteria that is a part of the rest of VHIP, which is, and those are maximum of $30,000 per unit. There's also a building envelope, $30,000. Again, talk to your local housing trust to get the details on that program, or you can also find on the Department of Housing and Community Development or Agency of Commerce Community Development.
Or we'll get somebody on to talk about the program, so stay tuned. It might be one of the upcoming landlord management series seminars. So
what comes to mind, that we haven't asked you about? Is there any misnomers, any misunderstandings? Were there any potential navigable items that you believe people may have misnomers about that may prevent them from reaching out to you so that we could help our, renting residents as well as our leasing residents or rentor residents? I need coffee.
It's a good question. Why haven't you had more coffee? No, this is, it's hard to know, right? Because this is essentially a pilot in the way that it is a statewide program. So as opposed to these smaller programs. So we have spoken to the people, to the agencies that have been administering these local programs, and so we've hopefully designed it with a lot of those things in mind. And I talked extensively multiple times with the Burlington Housing Authority and how they do their programs, and we talked to other states that have done these programs, and So we're hoping we're touching on, it's the balance of being wide enough to do everything we want to do, but also being a niche as well, so that we're hitting specific items and also really having measurable outcomes, so that we can bring this back to the legislature and say, hey, this is, these are exactly what we did. These are the guidelines we set, and we need more money per unit, less money per unit for a longer time. What do we need? And so that'll only come out through time and sort of seeing what what type of claims are being asked for, whether it's always vacancy loss, or it's always repairs, or it's always tenants leaving. Where do we need to ramp up the program, and where can we tone it down to, to move the focus onto other parts that are more successful.
Excellent.
Nice. And so I think, Tyler, not to ask too many pointed questions, but what kind of updates can you give about the winding down of VRAP, and what you perhaps know about the timing of that?
We're having internet issues here, Angela. I can't hear. No, I'm just kidding. It's really VRAP is winding down. You've seen the VRAP newsletters coming out, and we have been ramping down. We, you can look at some of the other states, and they gave a week's notice and just shut off the rental assistance at 100%. And that has just been devastating in other localities. There are some 150 VRAP, whatever Cal RAP or New York RAP programs that are running all over the country, right? And our ramp down is really a unique way that Vermont has utilized its funding. But we do know that they will be extended now through June of 2023, and that still be available. So we're going to focus on the 30% of AMI, and that will be at a partial payment. That's the consensus, was that we wanted to reach more people for a longer period of time. Like I was talking about, as opposed to 100% payments for a shorter period of time. We wanted to make sure everybody got through the heating season as much as possible. So this is looked at more as a subsidy than just a total rent payment. And go ahead.
I was to say, so the one question I've been getting frequently is, when landlords agreed to participate in the VRAP program, one of the certifications they made was that they agreed to not evict the tenant for non-payment of rent. And if the landlord then is only receiving a 50% subsidy on the rent, what tools do they have if the tenant is not paying their portion to the landlord? Is there a mechanism that's been put into place for that situation?
That would be perhaps your expertise. I mean, as far as landlords' options when tenants aren't paying their rent. Right now, we just got this new information from Joint Fiscal yesterday, and we have reached out, and we're seeking legal guidance to make sure that we are able to help people out as much as possible. At this point, people did sign the attestation to not evict during the assistance period. We realized that the contract has changed. However, that didn't happen quickly. It was, the wheels of bureaucracy. So we just found that out yesterday, and we want to make sure that we understand the, size of the issue. And as we're hearing as well, Angela, that is a concern. That is something that's happening, and we will look to address it the best we can. I can't say too much on how that will change it. The attestation was in place at the time of the application, but since the application or the contract has changed since then we'll be looking to how and if we adjust that. We definitely don't want to put people in the position of being evicted during the winter months. But then there's also the landlord side of it, where then do they think they just can pay 50% of their rent and not be evicted? So it's it is a delicate one, and I don't want to say too much and get myself in trouble before.
So what I'm hearing is stay tuned, because there may be some additional guidance coming out due to the changing landscape.
There has to be additional guidance coming out. It's really important that we get this information out to landlords as quickly as possible. And so hopefully before the end of the month would be excellent, because we'll have another pay rental term, whatever, starting a rental period starting in a few weeks.
Yeah.
When it's getting lighter.
Right. Okay. I mean, that is the big issue that I've been hearing about, the ramp down and the sort of partial payments that are coming. So having some guidance, or knowing that somebody's looking at this and going to potentially make some revisions to those certifications or requirements is helpful. And to the extent that I can be a resource, I'm happy to do that. So
thank you. And Caprice has unmuted and raised her hand, or she's waving to us.
Could be a wave, I guess. I just want to also be transparent that we are getting a lot of feedback, and I'm assuming some of you may be getting this as well eventually, is that because VRAP was a tenant-driven program, when we are doing repairs under VRAP, the tenants are made aware of what we are issuing to the landlord. And so we have heard a bit about some consternation about tenants feeling they don't need to pay the rent because now the landlord got these dollars, and we'll be discussing that as policy as well, because we do want to make sure we're answering that as clearly as we possibly can. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. And will those announcements come through
The newsletter.
the newsletter and the email list? So if you're not signed up for the newsletter, probably a good time to do that so you can get that information.
And you can sign up for that. You can go to the VSHA.org website, click on the VRAP button. That's right on our landing page there. That'll take you to our VRAP page. And right up there at the top, it says sign up for the newsletter. And when it says what type of or who you are, and select landlord, because that's where we will be drawing out of. People sometimes select multiple, or they just ignore that part of it. Make sure you put that in, so you will get the landlord specific newsletters, because we do send out multiple newsletters. Sometimes it's just to service providers, sometimes just to tenants, sometimes it's to everybody, and sometimes it's specifically for landlords. So we will be migrating that landlord list over to this program. And so if you want to be on that, make sure you sign up either by sending an email to Caprice or by going on our website and signing up through the webpage here.
Excellent. And then are there still sort of payments coming out? I mean, I know programs are winding up, but are there still payments being made through the stipulation program that were submitted by the deadlines, and for the repair program that was submitted by the deadlines, or are those just completely done?
So those payments, we will be making payments through the end of the month. We have to have everything out the door, by the end of this month. So for all those ERA1 payments, there might be more coming in for other payments that were contingent on additional funding. We did get some good news on that, but the details, that was just yesterday, joint fiscal, but so we're waiting on the details of that before we give out any more information. But we're hoping that we did a pretty extensive, Caprice and her team just scrubbed all the files for anybody who had any sort of check mark and other expenses box to make sure that they, anything with these, real life safety, health and safety repairs and everything was in on time, and, that they are going to be paid or reimbursed for their projects. But
okay.
And for the fees, Angela, too, we are still processing some of the stipulations that came in, and we're I just got 3 more yesterday. So we are processing those as quickly as we can.
Okay, so there's still some of those in the works, and I think I read in one of the newsletters that the Money to Move program, which is the program that allows tenants to have first last security and some moving expenses, is running through the end of the year. So potentially
So, well, no,
Oh.
so let me clarify on that.
Okay.
So the money to move request needed to be asked for by November 30th. And
Okay.
it really is just for security and last month, because the first month can be part of a benefit month. So it's not part of this. The application had to be in by November 30th. The move into the unit had to be by the end of December in order for us to pay it. That's the little tricky thing. If they haven't already applied, they cannot apply. But if they did request before November 30th, we are still finalizing those.
Okay. All right. Good to know. And I think, that's been a source of confusion for a lot of folks. Yeah. What the timing on those are. So it sounds like if application hasn't gone in, because we're now in the middle of December, it's not going to happen. But if it was in, there's still some that are being processed.
Yes.
Right, and so they might be waiting for the lease because the signed lease might be still outstanding. So if they had requested it and they had a move-in date of December 16th, then they'll sign the lease tomorrow and turn that in. And with that, they'll get the whatever is required by the lease, which could be security and last month's rent.
Okay.
I do believe we have a question from one of our applicants, and anybody on, please do feel free to use the Q&A. We'd love to answer your questions. From Sheila Jacobs. Sheila, thanks for joining us today. I hope you're well. I have a specific situation I would like to help with regarding a tenant who received VRAP payments that ran out. Since then, time has passed. There's 10 to 11,000 past due. There's now a notice to vacate for 12/30, as in December 30th. What happens if a new program from VRAP is available and she doesn't vacate? Can I qualify for her to be part of the new program?
You said that she used up the benefit months. Is that, I guess that's the question. If they've used 18 benefits months, then they wouldn't be eligible. As of right now, we haven't heard any change in guidance from the Treasury, and I really, if I had to bet on it, I'd say that they will not be adding additional months. They already, the program started out with 12 months, and then it went to 15, and then it went to 18. So I really would be really surprised if they went past that. If you've reached the 18 months benefits, then
and feel free to send the tenant ID or information to me, and I can look it up for you and give you a definitive answer as to where they are at in the situation.
Remind everybody who's attending, Caprice put her contact information in the chat, so feel free to email her. Sheila, first, my heart goes out to you. I can appreciate the challenges of the situation, and secondly, maybe Caprice could get you some case specific information that'd be helpful. But it sounds, yeah, she has hit the 18 months. That's unfortunate.
The other thing that I would share, Brian, and if you look at that link that Brandon helped me share, just the OEO resources, through our Housing and Opportunity Grant Program, we do have eviction prevention funds available through fund administrators around the state. So it's not the same as ongoing rental assistance, but it can help in those situations where the household is qualifying at risk of homelessness. So the situation described, there's a date, there's been a notice out. And so if you look on the Housing Opportunity Grant Program award summary for this fiscal year, look for whoever is flagged as like the fund administrator in your region, and that household could go to that fund administrator, be working with a housing counselor saying, I'm facing an eviction, I'd like to get support. Again, it's not ongoing rental assistance, so it's quite different from VRAP, but it can be utilized in these urgent situations. And so you'll see one for different parts of the state. So for instance, in Bennington, it's Brock. In Rutland, it's Homeless Prevention Center. Springfield is Springfield Supportive Housing. So again, if you look for HOPS Fund Administrator, that could be a resource for landlords to share with their tenants. And again, those fund administrators could be good resources to just learn about like, okay, what are the eligibility? What will this cover? What's the process? But since there is sort of an eviction in the work, it sounds like this household would qualify for some of that assistance.
Excellent. And Sue Wiley, we understand that you have a question. Love to have you enter in the questionnaire, question and answers so that we can answer it for you. Really appreciate the interaction. And Sheila, it's stated that she stopped communication with me completely, unfortunately, in October. With humor, one of my tricks, I put my phone on the charger. I use somebody else's phone and then see if I can establish communication. I'm not sure that's going to work for you, Sheila, but you might try it. Angela might not tell you not to do that.
I mean, if you can get them to answer the phone to have a conversation to try to help them, it's unfortunate that that's the lengths you have to go to try to have that conversation with a tenant who is perhaps embarrassed or doesn't know what to do and isn't aware that these resources are out there to help them, and just isn't aware. And so, you know, it's hard for a lot of people to take those calls when the landlord makes them, because they don't have an answer for you, and they don't know what to tell you.
Absolutely. Any other questions as we round out an hour? I'm really excited. I really appreciate you guys being on today. I've definitely grown. I've learned from it. I've actually, one of the things I'm going to personally do out of it is really try to work with our home buying and multifamily buying, consumers to make sure they know this money is available, which I think should hopefully create more affordable housing for, tenants may have been challenged by homelessness or something. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And it looks like we did have, let's see, Lily, thanks for your last comment on here. Any other questions from anybody? Let me just see if Sue typed hers in. Angela, sounds like you've got a new case out of this session today. So congratulations. But I can't stress enough, I really appreciate everybody making the time. Angela, anything that you think we haven't asked that we should ask before we thank everybody again and wish everybody a happy holiday?
I mean, I think it's probably, I would agree with Lily. I think we should have everybody back in the spring once the program is officially launched, so we can get some more details, find how things are going, get some more of those nuts and bolts of exactly how landlords access the program. Once it's formally launched, I think that's a great idea and something we can definitely work in to the program here. But I think, like anything, just for people to be remembering and mindful that with every new program, there is going to be hiccups and there are going to be some growing pains, and to just be patient as those get worked through with this new program.
Yep. Tyler, Lily, Caprice, any final thoughts you'd like to share, as well as we're going to be posting this to our YouTube channel as well, or the Vermont Apartment Owner Association's YouTube channel?
I think I'm all set. Just thank you so much for having us. This was, really our first marketing of this program and on any scale. So it's been great to also get some questions and know what we're gonna do as we finalize that. We'll be getting a one-pager, as they're called, out PDF that you'll be able to share widely, and we'll be getting that done shortly. So that look to be seeing that in the near future with some details of this program. To spread it around, spread the news, spread the joy.
Perfect.
Thank you guys, and thank you everyone for attending today.
Thank you
so much for having us. And now I learned that Zoom, you can hear my baritone music in the background.
It was pretty good. I just didn't know if it was
I wasn't
topic of discussion. But everybody, thank you very much for your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your holiday. We'll see you in the beginning of the year. And thank you folks for your service to the landlord and renting residents. We appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.